Welcome to Myths for Now, where we operate with the notion that myths are condensed educational tools, distilling centuries of trial and error into a sticky narrative meant to pass along to subsequent generations so that they don't have to do the same mistakes as their predecessors. Tonight, we will have for you a memorable epic poem about the time in 1969 at a bar called the Stonewall. A police raid was thwarted by the patrons, half of whom allegedly grieving Judy Garland, the other lending a shoulder to cry on whilst tucking away their unwelcome erections over the rare affections. It was a hot summer night, and speaking of undue heat, check out the cops looking for some faygelehs to put on the newspapers. Well, girls, time to turn the tears to disquiet as the first wave of heels and pricks fell to a riot. Roll out the myth maker, please. Don't be fooled on this modest AV cart. This little glass stone is unfurling on this slender ticker tape a string of words that I will recite to you now. This myth dedicated to the well-being of our posterity. Sing, O muse of the spangled jacket, of the voice that cracked but never broke. Sing of the children who gathered in your name, cloaked in grief as thick and stifling as the Christopher Street air. For the god of grey flannel suits of suburbs and of starch-colored despair had sent his minions, his blue-clad horde, with nightsticks drawn and faces grim, to douse the final flickering candle, to punish every whim that did not fit the pattern, that did not march in time. They came to stamp out beauty, to legislate a crime whose only sin was finding love in a world that offered none. And in their hands, the warrant in their eyes, the joy of the bully's fun. They saw the boys in mascara, with sorrow on their breath, and saw not Samso brothers, but omens of a social death. They saw the doyens of the drive, the queens of faded grace, and shoved them toward the wagon to erase them from this place. But a hush can hold a hammer, and grief can find its teeth. And neat air grew taut with something buried deep beneath the powdered sighs, the limp-wristed wave, the practiced, witty shield. A different kind of spirit was waiting, unrevealed. First to fall was fear, a casualty of scorn, when a sister of perpetual fabulousness, tired and forlorn, refused the shove, and with a weary grace looked in the sergeant's eye. "My dear," she sighed, her voice a dusty butterfly, "the sequins on this dress have seen more action than your sad career." And in that pause, a new world's atmosphere was born from sovereign cheer. Then came the shout from Marcia, a cry that rent the night. Then came the shot glass sailing, a shard of jagged light. And what was once a chorus line was now a phalanx, hard and fast, a legion of the long ignored, their patience overpassed. The leather deities, stoic oaks, became a wall of studded hide. The street kids, quick and nimble, skirmished at their side. The lipstick lesbians, with arms linked, a barricade of will, held the line upon the pavement, resolute and still. They armed themselves with what they had, a brick from a construction site, a stiletto heel, a loaded purse swung with ferocious might. A compact mirror, flashing, became a shield of blinding sun, and every taunt they'd ever heard was loaded in the gun of righteous, sudden anger, a liturgy of no. A seed of liberation planted in the gutter's glow. The blue-clad horde, bewildered, saw their simple plan descend into a bacchanalia they could not comprehend. These were not cowards to be swept, not vermin to be crushed. This was an army born of sorrow, gloriously unhushed. They fought not for a kingdom, nor a banner, nor a crest, but for a dance floor in the darkness where a weary soul could rest. For the right to hold the hand in public, for a kiss that wasn't hid, for the beautiful, defiant, sacred thing they did. So listen, child of the future, when you feel the world grow cold, and you hear the old, grim stories of the righteous and the bold. Remember that our temples are not always built of stone. Sometimes they're built of gin and jukeboxes and courage felt alone that finds its sudden echo in 1,000 other hearts. Our foundational, fierce scriptures are the throwing of the parts of a broken, cobbled together life against the walls of hate. The fire that they started that night to open up a gate still burns. So cup your hands around it. It is your myth, your light, your heat. It started with the riot on a hot and sticky summer street. But the song of that rebellion, a symphony of rage and shards, did not die on the asphalt. It traveled through the yards and leaped the razor wire to where, in grey stone, silent rows, sat the women's house of D, where nothing ever grows. Here, in a garrison of grief, in shifts of faded blue, were the women they called wayward, the ones who broke a rule or two. The shoplifters, the brawlers, the lovers of the wrong damn sort, the ones whose weary business was the city's last resort. We, in ourselves, had heard it all, the city's nightly pains, the domestic squalls, the traffic wars, the sirens in the rains. We learned to sleep through chaos, to treat it as a passing hum, to seal our hearts in concrete, to let the soul go numb. But this sound was different. It was not a lonely scream. It was a beast with a throat of glass, waking from a dream. It was a beat, a new percussion, not of drums, but falling things, a choir whose angry anthem was born on brick flam wings. A girl named Red, with knuckles scarred from a fight she didn't start, pressed her ear against the window, trying to take the sound apart. That ain't no rumble, she whispered, her voice a rusted key. The cops are getting pepper, and it ain't from you or me. We crept toward the barred-up slits that gave us scraps of sky, and saw the strobing colors flash in every passing eye. We knew the blue and red light waltz, the prelude to the cage, but we'd never heard an answer word with such united rage. We knew that tune of fury when the boot is on your neck, but this time, for the first time, the street was fighting back. And something in our ironed-out bones began to feel a heat, a sudden, wild communion with the riot on the street. For every time a matron sneered, for every callous hand, for every sneering verdict we could not understand, those shouts outside became our own, the rage we'd had to hide. The breaking of the windows was the breaking of our pride. We, the fallen daughters, in our dormitory of shame, felt a sudden, startling kinship, and we whispered freedom's name. We breathed it in like contraband air, a lungful, sharp and deep view while down below. Our sisters woke the city from its sleep. The morning came, as mornings do, with quiet, mops, and lie. But the air was changed forever. There was a question in the sky. A god came through, complaining of the freaks and of the mess, but in our eyes he saw not fear, but something that was less. Less cowed, less grey, less broken. For the myth had breached the walls. It echoed in the tired scrapes of footsteps in the halls. A story told in sirens of a cage whose door was tossed. A lesson learned in darkness by the lonely and the lost. That even in the deepest cell, a tremor can be felt when enough forgotten people decide the hand they're dealt is not the hand they'll play. And so they built their church of strife. And its sermon gave us, for a moment, back our goddamned life. But myths are not sustained on battle cries alone. The dawn came up like a stern-faced landlord asking for the rent. And the great, snarling creature of the street was gone. Its energy was spent. What was a legion under streetlights, fierce and of one mind, broke into simple, weary bodies of the hunted kind. They scattered with the morning sparrows, each to their own cage, to scrub away the evidence of glitter, hope, and rage. See there, a boy who faced a shield, a David with a stone, now quietly reknots his tie and calls his mother on the phone. He pours himself into the sun his parents think they knew, his voice a placid, even calm, his alibi held true. But as he lies about the movie, Something in him stands up straight. The cinder of the right glows behind his placid face, a newfound steady weight. And see the door, home at last, her stockings in a tear. She draws the blinds and pours a drink to banish all the fear. The quiet of her empty flat, once a lonely, mournful ache, now holds a different echo for her spirit's own damn sake. She caught the eye of a scared girl in the chaos of the fray, and in her days saw not a victim, but an army on its way. The butch who drove a taxi, who had thrown the first good punch, sipping coffee at a diner with the early morning brunch. The truckers don't look at her twice, this broad and solid soul, but the counter she is leaning on now feels less like a goal and more a starting line. Her hands curled round the heated mug. Remember not the pain, but the electric, stunning hug of unity, of seeing fear in a policeman's eye. The world had cracked. She'd live to find the reasons why. For the hum of that rebellion didn't vanish with the sun. It was a virus of conviction, carried home by everyone. It burrowed deep inside the roles they had to reassume, a secret seed of promise in the suffocating room of expectations closet behind the sensible gray suit. It was a whisper saying that was just the root. The myth of man, not just in shouts, but in the hush that came thereafter, in the rustle of a leaflet, in the low and knowing laughter. It was the first strategic meeting in a dim-lit coffee shop. The riot had been the question, the movement was the plot. For the bravest thing they did was not to fight and bleed and brawl, but to go home and wake the next day and decide to risk it all again. But this time, organized, with coffee and a plan. That, child of the future, is how this world began. Listener, did you really think using virus for the movement was a bit, you know, something that also happened in our history? Something that might give a word like virus a little country weight? Me! Oh, I hadn't noticed it at all, but you're absolutely correct.